This training is going to be recorded for those who are not able to join us today. But I would like to thank those of you who are here for joining us for today's session on adaptations and accessibility. I would like to welcome our three amazing panelists. We have Marcia Leanweber from our AT department. We have Rachel Rosenblum from occupational therapy. And we have Diane Schlegel from physical therapy. I apologize, she is having technical issues, so we're not gonna be able to see her lovely face, but she is here with us, I can guarantee that. Just a few general housekeeping. This is a webinar mode, so you are not able to speak. You are all muted. That is a format of webinar mode. However, there are two boxes that you will notice on your toolbar. One is a chat box. Please utilize that for responding to any of the questions that we pose to you guys, as well as if you have any information that you want to share. We want to hear your great thoughts and insight as well. And there's also a separate Q&A box. Those questions that box is for questions that will be coming to us. And if hopefully we'll have time at the end. If we do not have time at the end to answer all of the questions, we will make sure that we get responses out to you guys. Also, at the end of the session, we'll be providing the survey link and code for you so you can get credit for today's session. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome our three wonderful panelists to start today's presentation on adaptations and accessibility.
Jennifer, we have a couple of comments in the chat box asking, like, this is a webinar, you cannot hear us, and I can't see any participants or myself. Would you be able to respond to that?
Yeah, so as I just explained, this is a webinar. So by feature, you are all muted. Only the panelists are able to be seen through the videos and to be for you to be able to hear. So I do apologize. That is meant so that there aren't any accidental noise disruptions in the background. That is a feature of Zoom webinar. That's not something that I can control. However, I am able to unmute. So if any of you do need, if there is something that you want to say, that if you need to speak, if you raise your hand, I can unmute participants. So thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, we're going to get started with Diane.
Okay, so there's a little scenario I'd like to share with you. I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but let's just say you're working at home, maybe doing your Easter seals work, or you're watching your greatest movie on Netflix ever, and suddenly your internet or cable go out. So you call the company, and the most common company will remain nameless, and you're working and you get a voicemail. And of course, the voicemail is automated. And the automated voice gives you instructions, asks you questions, wants to know what your problem is, wants to be able to direct you to the proper person. But that process takes several minutes, and you're waiting and you're waiting. And then the tension inside your body is rising to a tolerable level, but it's getting more and more anxiety. So finally, they connect you to what should be a person. And while you're waiting, the voice message comes on indicating that you're number 19 in line to receive help from a real person. So you wash the dishes, walk the dog, do whatever, and finally it's your turn. You talk to the person. They give you instructions. They're talking a language you're not really understanding. They're giving you instructions, but it doesn't really make sense to you, and you're not totally sure that that's the source of your problem. So a communication rift occurs between the two of you, and the tension mounts inside of your body because you want your cable, your internet fixed, and you and the person are not connecting. You're not understanding what to do. So imagine now our students in our experiences, on our caseloads, who are trying to participate in a classroom activity, a therapy session, a playground activity, whatever. And for a variety of reasons, they're not able to fully participate in the activity. How do you think that child is feeling? And what might their reactions be to the situation of them not understanding, comprehending what you are trying to get them to do? You can write in the chat boxes. How do you think that child is feeling?
We have a lot of frustrated. We have anxious. Maybe even a little angry. Angry, disinterested, confused. These are all great responses. Bored,
Absolutely.
bored, not interested, inadequate, time for a nap. Great responses. Thank you guys. And definitely how some of our kids might feel. Impatient.
But clearly not in a position to take in information from us or to participate in our agenda. So I think it's very obvious what we've learned from this type of activity, that when we're not communicating, when we're not engaged in an activity that has meaning for us, when we're not receiving information that we can use, things can get out of hand very quickly. We become very frustrated, angry, bored, avoidant, wanted to go away, wanted to end the conversation with this tech person at the cable or internet company. And the saying on the side here sort of says it all. If a child can't learn the way we teach, maybe we should teach in a way that they can learn.
All right, so for our objectives for this webinar is that we'll go away with some practical ideas for adaptations. To determine the best adaptations, focus on adaptations in their daily activities, identify barriers, recommend strategies for adapting activities, environments, materials, and resources, as well as ways children interact with activities and others. Okay, we're going to start with a poll to get some engagement from our participants. So I'm going to launch this poll and we'll go through the questions. The first question is, have you been making adaptations in your role at Easter Seals? So you can put your entries in. I have never made adaptations. I've tried to make adaptations before, but not so. And I feel I make adaptations frequently. Wow, 100%. That's awesome. Well, we're done. Okay. And so the question number 2 is, how comfortable are you with making adaptations? Help, I have no idea where to even start. I find making adaptations intimidating. I would be comfortable making adaptations, but feel like I have no time to make them as well. I get frustrated when I think about making adaptations. And that's a little more of a mixed review there. Okay. All right, great. I'm going to end it and share the results with you. So you can see we did change. We have 100% that make or 80% that make adaptations frequently, and then 20% have tried before. And then for question number 2, how comfortable are you? We're kind of all over the place, so that's good. You might get some good ideas today, and maybe you can share some of your ideas that have worked for you.
Universal Design for Learning, UDL, is a thought framework that helps us think about developing classrooms or learning opportunities for a diverse population of children in typical settings, such as daycares, preschools, middle schools, high schools, all ages. And we know that all children do not learn the same way, including children with disabilities in typical settings. Adaptations in a typical curriculum are normal process. UDL is being applied to many classrooms with the expectation that inclusion for everyone is essential. And this is occurring in Head Starts, regular preschools, in our venue. Adaptations for different learning styles is an essential component, including children with disabilities in typical settings. And what the 3 pillars of universal design are as follows. A means of representation. The expectation is that all children are different in how they perceive and understand information, and it's important to present information as many ways as possible, visual supports, concrete objects, verbally, etc. And that all children demonstrate what they have learned in different ways. And obviously some of these are maybe a bit high for some of our students, but they point out they're talking about typical kids in this particular theoretical framework, drawing points to a picture or using gestures. And that means of engagement is another pillar of universal design for learning, in which we must find ways to gain a child's interest, sustain their attention, and promote persistence in tasks. Children are interested in activities and materials that are related to their own life experiences, family cultures, as well as, obvious as we all know, popular characters and toys. So what are adaptations? Adaptations are changes needed to accomplish a task. And most of us are very familiar with them in our everyday life. If you have a pop socket on your phone, that's an adaptation to help us hold our phone more easily. Secondly, adaptations are based on a vision that moves towards equity. And we'll talk a little bit in the next few slides about equity. Adaptations are influenced by the environment or the context of learning. Context is described as the lens in which a child views their world. Adaptations make learning meaningful, and adaptations must be developmentally appropriate. And adaptations are limited by our imagination, which we're going to try to tweak today, but they're really limited by your very own imagination. So universal design approach to adaptations in the typical curriculum is you want to make adaptations in your classroom for specific learners or groups of learners where that could benefit all the children in the class. Universal or adaptations are a time saver. Adaptations help as many children access and participate in activities to the greatest extent possible to gain meaningful experience. And students, typically developing students, all require different amounts of types and supports. And how can we help them with the 3 pillars of engagement, action and expression, and representation? This quote came from a parent organization. It's a website for parents who have children with disabilities. And I inserted this slide for a specific reason. And the quote is, "We need to build a vision for the futures of the children we serve. The vision is not based on what presently exists. With the right supports, many things are possible." And I woke up this morning thinking of a couple of things that I hadn't thought of before that reminded myself, just to let you know that Biddy and Bo's is a coffee shop started in the South that's now in either Reading or Allentown, I can't remember, run by individuals with Down syndrome. There is a bakery in Doylestown that is run and operated by individuals with intellectual disability. There is an auto detailing shop right here in Bucks County that has individuals with all kinds of disabilities working there. And there's another bakery that's starting in Bucks County for individuals with intellectual disability. So parents often have visions. Parents often bring visions to life. But it's so important, especially we're in the day-to-day of everyday lives in our schools and all the challenges we have around COVID, to stay secure with a vision for the futures of the children we serve, because we don't know where they're going to be and what they're going to be capable of doing. And a lot of these adaptations are already used here in our Easter Seals programs. It's just a list to sort of remind us all of some of the common principles that UDL asserts. But using different kind of seating arrangements, the kids are not required to remain still, arranging classrooms for easy mobility with or without assistive devices, limiting the visual clutter, having soft music, reducing the noise level and chaos in a classroom, change the lighting, adapting furniture, providing slant boards, pegs or knobs to adapt handles on doors, shelves, cubbies, and puzzles, keeping things at a child's eye level, visual support such as large classroom schedule, mini schedules for each student, and visual supports for activities. So we're looking at a multimodal approach, and we're going to use that word frequently. And there's just 3 resources here. At the end of this webinar, we'll probably be able to provide a list of more resources that we can send out. So one of the principles of UDL is to ask ourselves in our classroom settings, therapy settings, wherever we're providing service to children, there's lots of questions we can ask ourselves. And one of them is based on this picture that I love about equality and equity, and it speaks for itself. A lot of times we think we're providing equality for students by just providing an adaptive device or an adaptive this or something else. Yet we've kind of still missed the mark because we haven't moved them toward equity. And equity is the goal, and it's the goal of universal design of learning as well. And it's our goal for our students as well. And we want to provide activities that are meaningful, that are not too hard or frustrating or scary, but are motivating and enjoyable, just plain drop out fun. How are the expectations with the adaptations we've made meeting the children that we serve where they are? Are we helping them to meet their IEP goals? Are we moving them toward independence? And as a PT, to me, that's everything. Why is this important? And what is the difference in providing equality and equity for our children to access and participate in activities meaningfully? And we've already talked about that a little bit, but that's something that I'm thinking a lot about now. It's just food for thought for your future. Just, are we providing equality or are we providing equity, even in our most restrictive environments? So where Easter Seals and a lot of the kids we serve, we may be participating in the community or in our own sites where we have typically developing children, but in our settings, a lot of times we're differentiating into adaptations where we have children that require even more support and more adaptations and creativity in order for children to access and participate in our classroom activities so that they are supported and they have beneficial learning opportunities. We need to be able to determine the different adaptations available and what are creatively existing in our brains that are necessary so all children can access and participate. And we want to identify how to implement different adaptations within the same activity at the same time, multimodal. And here are just some questions. A lot of times we might be doing some things by ourselves, but mostly here at Easter Seals, we're working in a team process. So the questions that we want to ponder are, you know, what adaptation is being added to a child's life? Why is this adaptation being added to their program? How will the adaptation promote the child's participation in a routine or an activity and move them toward independence? What materials are needed? What steps are needed to make the adaptation? And how will the team know if the adaptation is working? And that's from the Inclusion Network. And when in the process of researching some of this, different team processes, forms have been developed. You might want to look them up. We can provide some resources if you want, but just some people like visual representations of what they're doing so that each adaptation might have a chart that goes along with it that answers some of those questions to the left.
So for this slide, we will engage with the chat box. So let's reflect on the question, what does meaningful engagement look like? Let's just put some quick brainstorm answers in the chat. We have interest, participation, child is actively participating in an activity. I agree. I think actively participating can look like a lot of different things for different kids. Enjoyment, agreed. Like if a kid is having fun, interaction, multiple children, adults participating. Child is able to communicate choices. Yeah, I agree with all those. Oh, child feels at ease and is not a job. Yeah, I think that kind of goes along with like feeling like the child is enjoying themselves. Oh, curiosity. Self-motivated. Yeah, all of these. I think I look for too, like for as far as engagement, like what does that mean for that child and the difference between like if the child needs hand over hand for every aspect of what they're doing, is that engagement versus maybe something not coming out a certain way, but you know, participating in the process, trying and having some measure of independence. And I agree with all these answers. That's great. So how do we encourage children to meaningfully engage in activities and show these signs? So we'll consider these answers as we move forward as far as what we're trying to elicit and what we want to see. We can go to the next slide. So we're going to take a look at some examples and consider barriers to access, some adaptations that were made for real children, and some possible results of the adaptations. So we're going to begin by using the example of arts and crafts time. So no matter what division you work in or the type of setting, I was hoping it would be safe to use art time as an example of a regularly occurring classroom routine that we all might have in common. So with arts and crafts, there are a lot of layers to work with that fall into the categories of student, task, and environment. And these are all factors that we'll consider as we discuss adaptation examples further. So as far as student factors that may impact art time, if a child likes or dislikes messy play, if they have a tendency to mouth non-food objects and materials, if they have a visual impairment, a physical disability, even color preferences, what colors they like, their attention span, frustration tolerance, fine motor skills, their positioning, also their sensory processing patterns and movement needs. As far as the environment, are the lights on or off? Is it noisy or quiet? Is there music in the background? Is it crowded or spacious? Is the environment visually cluttered with all of the materials out on the table, or are they isolated one at a time? For the task, what is the activity? How long will it take? Is it simple or complicated? Is it one step or multi-step? What tools are needed to complete it? Is it free form or copying from a model? And more. So as we discussed with the universal design principles, there are ways to implement adaptations that benefit everyone, but there also still may need to be differentiated adaptations that are student specific. So in this category of adapted tools, it could go either way depending on the student. So this first picture is an example of adapted mounted scissors. These scissors allow a student who knows how to push down to still be able to snip. So I once worked with a student who was only able to move his head very slightly and smile or open his mouth independently. So using scissors or working on those skills wasn't necessarily something that would be appropriate for that student. But with these adapted scissors, he was able to participate with some support and just get exposure to using them. He actually showed a really strong response to using them based on like the sound of the scissors and the feeling of the cutting through the paper as he pushed down with some support. And even though I was providing support to help him use them, I could still tell he was getting a lot out of using the scissors with his response that showed he was registering everything that was happening. The picture below is a former student of mine. It shows how she's using an apple stamp that is modified to have a popsicle stick stuck into it and foam tubing around that popsicle stick. It allowed her to hold the handle more easily. So this particular student's barriers to access were that due to her physical disability, she had a very tight grasp that she couldn't control how tight she was grasping. And it was also hard for her to hold thinner tools. So she did better with a built-up handle. So the tubing helped the tool be more comfortable in her hand and allowed her to make some stamps independently. The picture on the top right is of the bucket of adapted tools. It shows how different handles can be modified to be thicker, just like the apple stamper, but also things like cookie cutters and Play-Doh tools that don't normally have handles can be adapted as well. For a couple of those you see, I just hot glued a popsicle stick to the side of those tools that I covered with foam tubing. Lastly, oh, and I see a question, how do we promote arts and crafts in a child who is not able to initiate, maybe engage or sustain movement? So as we continue to go through examples, there are some examples coming up of like activities where the whole thing is modified. And so maybe we'll see if that maybe answers your question a little bit, and we can come back to that too. This last picture is of some spiky balls. It's just here to show that adapted tools don't need to be expensive or specialty tools or even be something that you DIY, but that just choosing an alternative tool might benefit students for a variety of reasons. These can be used to roll through paint, roll in a box for a larger version of marble painting, used for stamping or anything else you can think of. The next slide goes through some examples of adapting the entire task in a universal way for everyone. This first example shows painting with toys of interest or objects that are on theme. So stamping dinosaur footprints, painting with cars, or using objects related to whatever the theme of the week is might be engaging. And then the next picture shows ice painting. So it's just water and food coloring frozen with popsicle sticks into it. In my experience, it's been rare to find a student that is just right away inherently motivated to just take a paintbrush and calmly paint a picture. So something like ice painting that has a sensory quality and incorporates a built-in tool, it might be motivating, alerting, and a little bit more exciting. The next example below the ice painting is a contact paper collage where the kids can just put on materials and they'll stick to form a collage. So this is a great way to bypass tools entirely, like glue and scissors that the kids might typically need hand over hand to allow them to be as independent as possible. Sometimes you just don't have the assistance or staffing to have someone sit with every single child to open the glue, turn up the glue, and use it. And I'm getting some more questions here. Love the bell wrap song, dinosaur painting. Do you have a handout with these ideas? Yeah, so you guys will get these slides in a handout for sure. The next example.
I'm
the
sorry,
bubble wrap.
Rachel, I'm just gonna interject really quick. Part of what the professional development committee discussed about today's events is that after all of these sessions are done, all of the presenters are going to be providing their presentations and any resources, links, anything that we might possibly want to share with all of the Easter Seal staff. And it's going to be compiled into one unified reference for today. So at some point, you're going to be getting a link to all of the slides, all of the recordings, and all of the resources for all of the trainings that were held today. So please don't panic if we're going through this and you're like, oh my gosh, these are great ideas and I want to try to remember these. You will be getting all of that information soon. So, sorry for interrupting.
Thank you. It's very helpful. And Alicia says, I love how these are all process activities. I think that's a great point. Process, not product. There's no like end result that we're looking for that should look a certain way. It's about engagement and participation. And participation was one of the main things that you guys were saying when we were talking about what does meaningful engagement look like. And okay, so the bubble wrap stump, we didn't talk about that yet. So for the bubble wrap stump picture, it shows using feet, also completely bypasses hand use entirely. This can be fun for everyone to do art using big movements and gross motor skills in a way that might help everyone, but particularly students who don't like touching things with their hands or students who need a lot of movement and have a hard time sitting for art. Above that shows shaking materials inside of a container with paint is great to do something a bit different from using tools, like the tool is shaking. So just something a little bit different from like markers or paintbrushes, and the act of shaking creates the art, and it's fun to do along to music and can also be done while sitting or standing. At the bottom, the last one is paint bags. These are a great way to approach painting for everyone that contains the mess and may help students who don't like to get their hands messy. It can be abstract just to mix colors and look at, but you can also slip any piece of paper in there that targets a lesson or theme that you would like to cover with paint. We can go to the next slide. This slide is about adapting how the task is presented. This first picture shows doing art on a vertical surface. So using a wall or a window is a great vertical surface to do activities like the contact paper collage, the paint bags, or coloring. You just tape things up there. This allows the activity to be completed in a variety of positions and also puts the task right in front of our visual field. This may help students visually attend if it's right there versus on their desk where they would, or table where they would have to look down. Also, reaching to do work on a vertical surface helps strengthen the shoulder girdle muscles, and these muscles are important to provide a stable base for fine motor skills or using our fingers to develop more at our fingertips. The next picture to the right shows an activity where they are doing art on the floor. This is nice to switch it up, and therapeutically, it allows for the art to be completed in different positions, like on their belly or hands or knees. To the right of that is a picture of a similar paint bag activity, but it's just presented differently. So it has a black foreground that creates high contrast. And this is great to increase visual attention, make it really clear for students to see what they're doing. And it's also a great activity to do on top of a light box, which is in the couple pictures below. So for light box activities, they're just an incredible tool to do so many things are included. Turning the lights off and drawing, doing paint bags, or really any art task on top of the light box, it really draws visual attention, almost like a screen would. It creates a really clear focal point of the activity that promotes high levels of engagement. If you don't have a light table or box in your classroom, this photo shows an example of a homemade one. And someone's asking, how do you do art on the floor? So one of the great things to use is, and not everyone might have these nice big rolls of paper, but first, maybe the easiest would be like sometimes in our different offices, we have big, tall rolls of paper, just roll out a huge piece of paper on the floor, tape the edges, and then anything like painting, stamping, rolling a ball in paint can be done, footprints, whatever. You can also like like break down cardboard boxes until they're flat and tape them together. Potentially using like a scrap sheet even, and doing like fabric painting stuff could work if that's not an option. Oh, rolls of wrapping paper work well. Thank you, Sarah. That's a great idea. So unrolling on the part where the design, like on the back where it's white, just having like a nice big material, anything that can spread out would work for that. There was one time for, I think it was the Valentine's Day dance in the Philadelphia division, we did a entire dance floor that was a big paint bag, and we used, and the bags exploded. Alicia's right. So Laura's saying, yes, I was just thinking about that. So we did like shower curtain liners and put paint in between. Unfortunately, we should have like triple, quadruple layered it. And Laura says the second year we double bagged and then it was okay. Yes, Laura. And for kids with minimal voluntary movement. So maybe for kids, for the floor art, I think you're meaning, Kathy, for kids with minimal voluntary movement, looking at positioning for floors. So maybe there's a side-lying piece of positioning equipment, if your division has that, or even like a prone scooter that is like those tumble form, the blue prone scooters that you can use like a strap to have the child on their belly and move around, creating like maybe paint with the wheels or even holding a tool or something like that. A jet mobile. I don't know what that is. Jet mobile. I don't know. Would love to hear more about that. And Laura says they were clear shower liners from the Dollar Tree. So very affordable activity about the paint dance floor that we were talking about. Okay, I think we can move on to the next slide. Okay, so this slide shows examples of ways to adapt what materials are used. The first picture shows examples of visually stimulating materials. Shiny or holographic tape or paper stimulates movement, and that attracts the eye, and it can also make it more likely that students with or without visual impairments might attend to the task. The picture on the right shows some textured materials. These are great for really hands-on kids. Sometimes these materials make noise when you crinkle them. It can add a nice tactile element to make art more engaging. Below that shows an activity for painting with bubble foam. This is a great tactile sensory activity to get messy. I have the recipe for this activity on the next slide. The picture to the left of that represents the category of taste-safe options for arts and crafts for classes that have students who may mouth non-edible objects or materials. This particular picture is of a taste-safe chalk recipe, and this recipe is also on the next slide. Okay, so this slide you're welcome to screenshot for later, and everything will also be in the resources that you get later as well. But it has some of my favorite recipes for what I consider like safe just in case recipes. The only one that's not, and Alicia says, just make sure it's also taste safe for your students' oral motor and swallowing abilities. That's a great point. We don't want to give students anything that's that they would put in their mouth that is not meant to be mouthed, and also not a safe texture for them as determined by their doctor or speech therapist. So the only one that's not edible here is the No Tears bubble foam paint. It's safe just in case because of the ingredient for the No Tears non-toxic bubble bath soap. The others are taste safe, which includes salt dough, which is great for animal or hand prints, like animal footprints or handprints, or sculpting. You can also bake the results as an option. Then there's the chalk, and then yogurt and Kool-Aid paint. And of course, at the bottom, it just states use these recipes with discretion according to individual student factors and allergies for safety reasons. And then I kind of wanted to come back to Kathy's question from the beginning of how do we promote arts and crafts in a child who is not able to initiate, gauge, or sustain movement. I think this question will also go well with what Marcia is about to talk about next as far as use of assistive technology, because I think it sounds like incorporating assistive technology into art might work for students like that might have limited movement abilities. to be able to use whatever available movements they have to make the most of it, to maybe use a switch to do like spin art or something, or make a dinosaur toy that feet are dipped in paint, walk across the paper. So we can go right into Marcia, who's going to talk about some assistive technology options.
Okay, as Rachel said, I'm going to share some examples of no tech, low tech, and high tech assistive technology things that will facilitate pre-literacy, literacy, and play activities, which would include arts and crafts. And as you can see here on the slide, it has a spin art that's switch adapted. So the child would be able to participate in art just by pressing a switch if they had that. And then, as we would always go through, there are lots of access points when using a switch, and different kinds of switches that would kind of facilitate the child's ability to engage in the activities. So we want, like I said, we want to get the students engaged in the activities, and we want to provide them access depending on their abilities, and then give them meaningful experiences with using the technology that we have, low tech, high tech, no tech. So here are just a few supplemental resources for visual things that you would use in the classroom. We have lesson fix accounts available. If you're not already signed up for one, just contact me and I'll give you the code and everything so that you can have access to the lesson picks. And here are some web-based resources, different places where the kids can go to participate in activities using the computer or a switch or an iPad or whatever they have available to them. We do have an account with Help Kids Learn, and I have the user and password down there at the bottom. But if you need that additional information, just let me know. There's boom cards. I know a lot of people were really using these when we were doing virtual services. So it's another way to interact with the screen and so forth. Oh, I see Alicia put in there tactile experience. She has a link there, so that's great. We'll include that. So you can also utilize the recordable devices, the Big Macs, the Little Macs, the step-by-steps. There are lots of books out there with repeated phrases to record the repeated phrase. One I just recently used was the leaves on the tree, right, with the fall theme, and the repeat phrase was autumn is here. So then we recorded autumn is here, and the children were able to take turns and participate in the story. You can use brown bear, the gingerbread man, run as fast as you can. And then down below, I have a resource there with different ways to use Big Macs and Little Macs for activities in the classroom. Or this is low tech, no tech, but you just have a book that you have and scan it. And then one of the copies you cut up into pieces. I had matching leaves. I had Find the Moon, so they would be able to Velcro take off, Find the Moon. There's some pre-made activities. This one I got from Speech Room News. I think there might have been a cost to it, but it wasn't that much. So there are things that are already created out there if you don't have time to scan and cut them up and laminate and all that stuff. But it's very easy to do, just use your imagination, like they said before. Once it's scanned too, you can also create a PowerPoint book where the child can review the book on their own just by hitting a switch to move to the next page and next page. So there are ways to do that also with just scanning a book that you already have.
Do you mind if I interject really quick, Marcia? And if you've also scanned the books, if you print them out on transparency paper, you can put them on top of a light box, whether it's your classroom one or the awesome DIY one that Rachel showed you that you can make out of a plastic container. And holiday lights, it's great, as Rachel talked about earlier, for visual attention to help make the pages of the books come to life. So It's a great alternative that I always love to share with people as an idea. Or as Alicia said, through the paper copy too. So even if you don't have transparency paper.
If the light's bright enough, it'll show through. Yep. And then you can use the multi-mesh portable communication devices too. Just, you know, make your template with the vocabulary from a particular book, and once you know, you can use the voice output, or you can take that out and cut it apart and use it for manipulatives for the different activities throughout the book. Bubble wands are always good for focus attention. If you don't have a bubble wand or one that's the right size, you can create one on your own with a pipe cleaner. Here's some web-based resources. Some of them are paid, some of them, they have some free things on there. I really like going to Teachers Pay Teachers, so I don't have to recreate the wheel. There are some free things, but there are paid things also. And then there are lots of apps. I just threw up a few on here, but a really good resource here is the Bridging the Apps. It's out of Easter Seals in Houston, and you can search for apps, you know, that by skill level, by age level, by interest, you know, by topic. There's all different ways you can search for particular apps, and they review the apps and have really good information on there. So that's a good resource if you're looking for apps. I see that Alicia and Laura put in more affordable adaptations, low-tech adaptations. Oh, great link. Battery interrupters, they're pretty easy to make. We make them all the time. If you want help learning how to make them, you can also buy them, but you can take a simple toy like a spin art and put a battery interrupter in there, and then you have a switch accessible activity. And I linked them with some books that, you know, might be appropriate. You can also, the bubble machines, I think everybody has one, or all the classrooms have one. They can be easily switch adapted. There are some commercially made toys that you know could go along with a particular book. There's a lot of them out there. They're a little more expensive, and then there are DIY ones where we learned how to do it and we can do them. You might want to link it with a particular book like The Very Hungry Caterpillar, Polar Express, those kind of things. But it's always good, and not just to have the toy hit a switch, but have meaning and experience for them. Have to go with the book or the theme or whatever it is that you're using in the classroom at the time. And then our wonderful power links. So there are two different kinds. I have both pictures there, so if you know what you're looking for. We have a lot of these in the buildings, and they can be used in a lot of different ways. Anything that has a power cord and a constant on off, you can use it. If you'll see in the picture, this boy is he's using a hair dryer. Sorry about the dogs. Using a hair dryer to blow the ball, to hit the pins, to do bowling. So that was his way of, you could use that for art too. You could have it blow the paint across. There are lots of different things you can do. You can use it with blenders. There's lots of things. Oh, okay. And Alicia says light boxes can also be switch activities. Yeah. So there's also this link for AbleNet, who make the power links and have activities and things that you can do using a power link. And this is a DIY light box. Rachel talked about the benefits of it, and this is just dollar store. I got the container at the dollar store. I got the fairy lights at the dollar store. A little bit of transparent paper so that, you know, it would kind of diffuse the light a little bit. And there I had a little light box for individual children. Don't have to worry about a power outlet. This also could be adapted with a battery interrupter for switch access for a child. And then another one where just put lights from the dollar store in a jar, a recycled jar, and glued it to the lid. Also made it battery interrupted if I could, you know, if it was needed, but simple DIY. This is a mouse house, which is a simple way to have a single click activation. It acts as a switch, a single click switch. It's a Bluetooth mouse, but we, you know, put the little cube to make it only do one click. So the child has a larger area to activate, and it can be used with an iPad or a computer because it's Bluetooth. And then we're getting to the more high tech, is what, you know, we did prior to the pandemic, a lot of 3D printing solutions. And the ones that I'm showing here are all ones that came out of things that people needed in the classroom and were able to collaborate and create. So this is Sabrina, our music therapist, and she needed a pick on a stick for a child who couldn't hold the guitar pick. So she created the pick on the stick, and it's great. And you can see it in use. There's some tactile symbols, yes and no, but there are lots of different, you know, variations that we've used. I apologize for the dogs again. This was used tactile symbols for visual schedules. So we had, instead of just having the picture, we had an actual object. If you couldn't find the little object at the dollar store, we can always print something to, you know, to represent what the child needs for their schedule. And then this was our super high tech. Lindsay in Philadelphia had a student who was not able to move her arm for coloring or painting or activities like that. So we collaborated, came up with a design for her to be able to move her arm and be able to participate in activities more independently. And I'm going to let Diane take over with some of the equipment and modifications.
Before Diane takes over, Marcia, there was a question in the chat box about how can we get the AT department, or how can we get some of the classes in Easter Seals centers connected with the AT department to get these ideas or adaptations for use with the children.
Send us an email. Yeah, we are all available. We have a contact person at each site, but you can contact any one of us at any time. And that's what we want to do, more of that, get into the classrooms and share ideas.
Thank you, Marcia. Sue, I hope that answered your question. If you need us to point you in the right direction of the right person, just let us know. Perfect. Okay. Thank you, Marcia. Diane?
So while our students are doing all of the things above, all the things that Marcia and Rachel have talked about, everybody at Easter Seals, I'm sure, has seen durable medical equipment for students who need significant support. We have, I'm sure everyone has used their equipment a lot, but we have used our equipment in wood chips, in mud, in grass, on a driveway. Let's just say it isn't smooth, and it has ridges. So we've tried to utilize our durable medical equipment to help our students access activities, outdoor activities, as well as indoor activities. And these are some examples of some dynamic seating adaptations, which are obviously much less restrictive and give some of these ideas, give children feedback that they might need in order to enhance their ability to participate in an activity. An example, on the left-hand side, there are 4 chairs. They're actually cantilever chairs, so that when a child moves, they give the chair itself gives feedback. So it's sort of a bouncing input for those students that need that feeling of movement and are having trouble sitting down. And obviously some of the other ones are working on core control or definitely moving more toward independence. Some of these ideas are not pieces of equipment that can be used for long periods of time, but some of them are for short periods of time, and sometimes some of our students need an adult to supervise. But these options allow for a lot more freedom of movement. And a lot of these things, even though they're very small, cost a lot of money, but we've been able to utilize a lot of pool noodles to do incredible things. And this is just a photo of a pool noodle that was used to surround a student to give the student a more stable base. And then of course, the mobility options are unlimited only by imagination. And these are just some examples of photos of students that are not at Easter Seals, but we have been using similar kinds of mobility options, such as the little green bumper car, the Kids Zone bumper car. And we recently used it on Thursday for our Halloween/Fall Festival Day. And we had students who had never been in the bumper car before, to our knowledge. They hadn't been in it at school for sure. And they were able to activate it. And some actually were able to steer it. And others just needed gentle behind the elbows support and were able to move the bumper car forward or in circles if they preferred. But there are a lot of creative people out there, and we're creative too. So these are just ideas. There's many, many things that can be done with PVC. And there was a gentleman in the middle picture of the little boy in the yellowish green shirt who was making bumbo seat wheelchairs for a while. I'm not sure if he still does it, but originally he made one for his grandson. And then of course we have battery operated cars in the picture to the left, which we have at Easter Seals, and the kids love those cars. And it gives them early mobility training and a different feel for speed and directionality, providing vestibular input, proprioceptive input over rough terrain, and all of the amazing experiences that children who are struggling to move can experience with these devices. And then someone on the right created this PVC device in order to get onto a beach, which is really amazing. There's lots of amazing beach things that they've adapted over time. And the final slide is something that we've worked very hard. I'm not really familiar what everyone else is doing at the other divisions, but in the Philadelphia division, we've worked really hard. Our PT department and all the other, everyone else on the team has participated in special days that we put on. We've had football frenzy, field day, Olympic day. There have been Valentine dances. And in these activities, we've tried to create opportunities for the children to do things that they might not have the experience or the opportunity to do typically. And it's just been a wonderful experience to see the joy on the kids' faces, but also the joy on our staff, on the faces of our staff, and the fun that it creates, and the opportunities for movement and trying new things and experimenting with fun in a different way. And we've had, from left to right, we've had, this is a picture of the mat that we had for the Sweetheart Dance. This is all pre-COVID, by the way. and some of the children were doing limbo, and we even had children in rift and shares and product design chairs go over that, go do limbo as well. We had Olympic children in the Olympics carrying the flag in from whatever country they were representing. These students here obviously were representing the United States. And these are students that have a little difficulty focusing, attending, maybe performing adult-directed tasks. So they were very well connected to the tasks. We had football frenzy where everybody, prior to COVID, everybody gets out on our parking lot and we play football. It's the most cheating form of football known to sports, but the kids run, and it's amazing how many kids know what to do with football, even though they've really don't have any school football experience. And the adults, as you can see on everybody's faces, it's just a lot of fun. At one of our dances a few years ago, one of our students attended in a light gate, and he was at the level of the other children. He wasn't in a wheelchair, he wasn't in a product design chair, and he had a blast. In the picture at the bottom, two students who have difficulty with engagement. One needed assistance to hold the football, but those two students are focused exactly on where they're supposed to be going. And that was a difficult task for both of them. And they are thrilled. It was just so exciting. And then we have different kinds of activities with balls and hoops. And then we have our kids who just love to pose for pictures. So again, we're looking for a multimodal approach. And the next slide will speak to that a little bit more. We just did this past Thursday on the next slide. We had a Halloween/fall festival event, and we had the wonderful opportunity to have Marcia with us from AT. So we set up a maze for the students, and they were able to use bikes or scooters or whatever they chose to use, and also the bumper car. And the photo to the left is a switch at the beginning of the maze that said ready, set, go. The students were either asked or directed or provided a little facilitation to activate the switch, ready, set, go. They propelled whatever they were in forward through the maze. And in the middle of the maze, Marcia had set up the little dog to the bottom right, a little Halloween kind of dog, a little vampire dog. And the children were able to activate the switch. And at the end of the maze, as noted on the curb, they were able to activate the switch that congratulated them for finishing the maze. And then we also have this huge, I don't know what this pipe is used for, but I actually got it from some builders who were in my area constructing underground stuff. But they gave me this, and we put a mat on the bottom, and Marcia attached little lights to the top, and some of the lights remained on. And then you can see to the side, there's a switch. So the children were able to activate the switch to turn on more lights as they entered the tunnel and went to the other side. And this was supposed to be a video, so sorry, I have tech challenges. This is a picture. We have permission from the parent to show you his photo. But this is a student who was never in a bumper car before, to our knowledge. And he's now activating the switch with hand-over-hand assistance to set that saying ready, set, go. And his hands were initially sort of placed on the activating levers, and he was able to sustain his grasp on the levers, and with some gentle pressure on the back of his elbows, he was able to go forward. And of course, he experimented with going in circles like everyone does, but he was really able to propel this forward on his own. One of the things about this particular student is he is very, very mobile. He moves around a lot. So focus and attention is a little bit more of a challenge for him. He was extremely focused and extremely attentive to this task. And these are just questions. Again, we've asked a lot of questions during this thing, but these are questions that you can process in your own head with your teammates. What types of adaptations require resources that are in Easter Seals inventory or need to be purchased? And what type of adaptations can be created or modified with our existing resources, which include 3D printing, the dollar store, and thinking outside the box with ideas like holiday lights and plastic boxes in lieu of a light box, or any materials that we can adapt to be useful for our students. And what are some of the things that can be made or modified that can save, something. Sorry, I can't see it.
That can save money or staff time.
That makes sense. And again, more things to think about. It's not rocket science, but it's important, especially when we're helping other teammates that might not fully understand why things are being used, why students need adaptations. But some rules of thumb: the simpler, the better. And does the adaptation make sense within the learning context? It's not just adaptation that was made because people with that particular disability get those kinds of adaptations. It's something that makes sense. And then, of course, do we have the necessary materials, or can we get them? So for the final activity, I know we're running close to end of time, but we would love to hear about what you're doing that has been successful in helping your students access learning activities in therapy settings or classrooms or wherever, playgrounds. And also, it's important to know that in this process that not every attempt, not everything we do is going to be successful. It might not turn out great. We might just end up laughing afterwards. But the important piece of the puzzle is to try and be as flexible as possible. But we would love to hear what you've been doing in your sites that seems remarkable to you.
And thank you to all the people who have already shared resources. That's wonderful.
If it's easier for you to talk, to share an idea or story you have that could benefit the group, just let us know and we can unmute you. But we'd love to hear the great ideas and things that you've done. And remember, like, not everything that you do is going to be successful. The trying is the important piece. So it's okay if it doesn't work the first time.
I see somebody's used the switch to hook up a fan for creating the wind. The kids like, yep. A lot of sensory things you can do with those.
Laura has a hand raised, so I think I can click allow to talk there. Okay, Laura, you can unmute.
Hi, everyone. So Rachel, this is kind of one for you, and somebody in the chat earlier asked about engaging in art with limited fine motor skills. Do you remember the kiddo in that you had in Starfish that we tried out the markers Velcroed to the vibrating toy?
Yeah.
Thinking about that is as another option. I don't know how best to explain it without showing a picture of it.
Right.
But there is a way that you can have a toy that vibrates and you put use rubber bands to attach markers to it that are open. And using the switch, they can actually draw in color on the page. And I know, Rachel, you tried that out. They decorated some
Just
Valentine.
an electric toothbrush with
Mm.
markers, and they just tape around the electric toothbrush, and just by turning it on makes it move and color and do things. So
Yeah, so they're basically describing like hands-free coloring. It just needs switch access. So if a student is able to press a button to make something happen, a vibrating electronic, like a vibrating massager, they have those, like we use like that ladybug massager. It's kind of a sensory brand item, with a battery interrupter. So the battery interrupter is just that little wire, it slips in right where the battery compartment is. And then that makes the vibrating toy switch activated. And so if a marker is connected to that toy and the student can press the switch, then it kind of hands-free ends up coloring on the paper, and the student can control when it vibrates and for how long. And it created a kind of cool, like swirly, abstract picture. Thank you for bringing that up, Laura. That was
Yeah,
good.
no, and that was a better explanation of it than I was able to think. So thanks.
No, thank you. And Kathy stated not everyone can activate a switch. I think for a student like that you're describing, that'd be a really great opportunity for a specific AT consult, if that's a possibility for the program. I'm gonna read Sarah's
yeah,
comment.
there are lots of different kinds of switches. Some of them can be like even on the eye, the smallest little movements called a twitch switch. So there's lots of different kinds of things. We would just need to find an access point that the child would be able to utilize a switch. I mean, with little tiny ones, just the smallest little finger. We have some that you don't even have to touch the button. You just have to hover above it, the candy corn switch. So there are lots of different access ways. So we can, do a consult, and we'll come out and we'll try some switches and different things.
Yeah, I think you're right, Kathy, that like a lot of the times when we talk about switch access, it seems like we're talking about like, those big buttons, and you're absolutely right. Those don't work for everyone. Sometimes those are just kind of what we mainly see, or what a classroom might have in the closet because it's been there forever. But that's why the AT department can be really helpful with kind of sharing what some of those potentially like higher tech options are, ones that are really meant for kids that have some really limited abilities that might need something a little bit different than those big buttons that we might be picturing.
And you can also get creative for positioning. So if a child isn't able to activate a switch with their hand, for example, but you have a common switch that maybe you place against their headrest on their wheelchair, or maybe along their knee, if they can have leg movements or something. I've seen the therapists getting super creative at the Yaffe Center with where they place switches. So it's not also just about like using your hand to access some of these switches to make these things happen.
You can also use increased muscle tone sometimes too, like involuntary movements to help start the process of learning how to activate a switch. And also Sarah wrote in the chat box, iPads to engage students during treadmill training. Thanks, AT department.
And
And Laura
wrote,
also
I gave
mentioned
drawing activities as well. And also kind of like that with like screen-based drawing activities, there's also computer games that are screen-based ways to complete art, like there's card making and different things like that to create an image.
Okay, well, thank you everybody for sharing your ideas, thoughts, and questions. We have Laura mentioned that the eye gaze labs are a great resource for kids with limited use of their arms and hands. And there is an eye gaze lab in each center, so just remember that. And there are various look to learn games on them. So thank you all of you for your time and participation. And I want to take another opportunity to thank these three amazing staff members who put a lot of time, work, and energy into preparing for today's session. Your ideas and information you had to share was so valuable. Thank you for your time and energy to prepare this for everybody. Don't worry, I'm getting to the code. I just wanted to make sure to give thanks to everybody first. If you have any additional questions and answer, or any questions that you would like answered, sometimes after you walk away from a session, you're like, I really wanted to ask this. Here is the contact information for today's presenters. Feel free to reach out to any of them if you have any additional questions. Again, thank you for joining us. The code for this session is 406AA. Have a wonderful day and happy adapting. Hopefully you tomorrow urged and motivated to get out there and try something new to make a difference in your kids' lives. You do every day, but try something new. Thank you again, everybody. Have a wonderful day and enjoy your next breakout session.